Oh man, this is getting so exciting! Trails of Cold Steel 4 was just recently released on PC. It was already out last year on PS4, but I play most of the games on PC, so that's why I'm talking about this right now. If you haven't seen my video gushing about why the Trails Saga is the most amazing video game cinematic universe in the history of gaming, you can check out my last video on it right down below. Still, I'm just gonna give you a quick refresher before we get into the fourth game. The Trails Saga is a long-running franchise consisting of several JRPGs made by Neon Falcom, all sharing the same timeline and the same universe. There are 3 story arcs in the series, and all is named based on the game's location: Liberl, Crossbell, and Erebonia. The Liberl arc consists of the Trails in the Sky trilogy, the Crossbell arc consists of Trails from Zero and Azure, and finally the Erebonia arc consists of the Trails of Cold Steel series. All of these games are connected, and all of their locations take place in the fictional world of Zemuria, filled with all sorts of people, histories, politics, and dark intrigues that surround the entire thing. Now you might be wondering why I only included Cold Steel 1 and 2 in the Erebonia arc. Well, that's because Trails of Cold Steel 3 and 4 are, in my opinion, the crossover arc. To put it simply, they're the Infinity War and the Endgame of the saga, respectively, as both of them have characters from the previous games joining together to fight against the powers of evil that will take over the world. The setting of the series can be best described as orb punk. It's kind of like steampunk, except instead of the universe's powers based on steam, it's based on orbal technology. The series blends a really good mix of science and magic, while also providing a history with such stunning depth and complexity that trumps a lot of video game universes out there. It even has mechs and mech combat if you're into that sort of thing. As for the gameplay, or at least for the main series, and not Nayuta, which is an entirely different game that has the same serious name, it's a typical JRPG with turn-based combat that uses positioning and area of effect attacks. The gameplay doesn't change too significantly from one game to another, except for the fact that it does tend to overwhelm you with loads and loads of characters to choose from as the game moves forward. I admit that while I enjoyed the gameplay, I've gotten rather increasingly impatient. I just want to get through the story so that I want to know what happens next. I actually ended up enjoying Trails more like a shonen anime rather than an actual video game, and I do that by literally cheating my way through the game, one-hitting every obstacle that I can think of and pressing that F5 button for more and more bonding points. And even then, I still really love the journey, which I argue makes up at least 80% of this entire universe, so it's a testament to how amazing the Trails Saga story is. And even with me skipping through most of the gameplay, the game still clocks at 40 hours at least, so if they're doing an anime adaptation of this entire thing, which apparently they will, they have to be committed to at least 5 to 6 full seasons, and that's just for one game. And now let's talk about why I love the series so much. The story, the characters, the narrative, the main quest, the side quests, the setting, the intrigues, the world building, pretty much almost everything about the Trails' universe is rife with so much interesting stuff. People that I care about, things I care about, locations that I've grown so attached to that has a place in my heart. It's the kind of game that I'm willing to plow through the story bits and play every side quest just to extract every little bit of interesting story from the universe. From the Liberal arc, it has Estelle, one of the best JRPG protagonists, scratch that, one of the best video game protagonists in general. As several characters say, she's like a walking ray of sunshine. She's fierce, determined, and sympathetic. She's tough as nails, but she's not entirely invincible. She's just a normal everyday girl who has to be confronted with situations that are beyond her understanding. Her love story with Joshua is among some of the best in video game history. I root for both of these characters and want to see them redeem themselves and survive to the very end, regardless of all the circumstances surrounding them. From the Crossbell arc, the city of Crossbell itself has been ingrained in my memory so much, to the point where it legitimately has a place in my heart. I know the way in and out of the city like it's my own hometown. I care for the fate of the city and its citizens. I rage at the prospect of the city being taken over by neighboring countries who like to use it for their own benefits. It's very rare for me to have an emotional attachment to a location, but the 2 Crossbell arc games successfully made Crossbell feel like my own hometown. From the Erebonia arc is the most accessible Trails game out of the entire series, and it's also one of the most character-driven. I love how it was structured like a museum tour for the entire Erebonia. I love how in every field study you get to know more and more important facts about the characters, the universe, the world surrounding it, all of that. I was so attached with the characters of the series that the ending of Cold Steel 3 left me emotionally tormented for about a week, and it was stuck in my head for so long to torment me with that emotional gut punch. Let's just say that the ending for Cold Steel 3 is the universe's equivalent of the Red Wedding scene, except there's a lot more emotional backstab rather than than physical. So can Cold Steel 4 follow up the events from the last game by concluding the overarching story of its epic universe into one package? Before we find out about all of that, since this is the concluding installment of the Trails series and pretty much the equivalent of the Avengers Endgame of JRPGs, there are gonna be massive spoilers for the previous games of the series, and I mean almost all of them. So if you haven't played those games, you can pick up any starting point in the series, such as Trails in the Sky, Trails from Zero, or Trails of Cold Steel. Do not get into the crossover arcs like Cold Steel 3 until you finish all of the games, feel free to skip Nayuta, and do not get into Cold Steel 4 until you finish all of those. But if you already knew or you don't care and you just want me to gush over the series anyway, welcome aboard. Spoilers from the previous series starts in 3, 2, 1... So it's been a couple of months since the event of the last Trails of Cold Steel game. To put the events in its most simplest way possible, a war is brewing amongst the Erebonian Empire and the Republic of Calvert, with Liberl and the rest of the nations surrounding the area getting caught up with the mix. Our protagonist, Reen Schwarzer, was devastated by Millium's death and has gone completely berserk and consumed by his demonic form to the point where he has to be restrained in an unknown secret facility somewhere that I won't spoil. The new Class 7 members, specifically Yuna, Kurt, and Altina, were evacuated into the mystical village of Erin, where they are under the care of Emma's grandmother Roselia. And yes, that's her grandmother. She's an 800-year-old loli. In any case, Class 7 discusses the various ways in how to get Reen back, reunite all the scattered force students and graduates, and form an epic plan to save not just Erebonia, but also the entirety of Zumeria. So can Cold Steel 4 conclude the entire series in a satisfying note? Why should I doubt Neon Falcom? Eidos have blessed me with this absolutely freaking masterpiece of a game. This game puts me in such a roller coaster of an emotion from start to finish. I feel joy, I feel anger, I feel pain, I feel bliss, but most importantly, I feel passionate. I want to see how it all ends. I want to continue breezing through the game just to know what happens to the characters, what happens to the universe as a whole. It's the most perfect way to conclude the entire saga. Or at least until Hajimari no Kiseki comes in, which is less of a continuation to the saga and more like one more story involving the characters that we love before we finally move on to the Calvert arc in Kuro no Kiseki. I don't know where to begin with Trails of Cold Steel 4, and after all of that gushing, there has to be something I don't like, right? Of course there are, and one of them is the bonding system in general. How it works is that you have all of these bonding points and there's a limited number of people that you can spend them on. I honestly don't know why it should be limited. It just means that you're not gonna see all of the character moments. At least in Persona, it's your time management that determines how many story content you can see, which is still stupid, but at least you can see all of them in a single playthrough, with an optimized day-to-day walkthrough. This game just arbitrarily limits the amount of people you can interact with, and I don't know why it does that. If it's to signify that your time is limited, then why can you earn these points by fighting monsters? Fighting monsters in and of itself is a waste of time. How can I get more free time with the characters by wasting my time fighting these monsters? This is precisely why the PC version is the best version. At least with the PC version, you can download a trainer and jack up those bonding points. Yes, you can just reload a save, but you're not earning the bonding levels in the playthrough, so what's the point? But that brings me to my next problem with the bonding system. Everyone, and I mean everyone, wants to bang Reen. For the characters that I don't want to romance, I just want to have a friendly moment with them, but almost all of them confess to Reen that it makes me feel guilty of rejecting them. The biggest sin of the second and the third game in terms of the romance is only having Elisa as a kissable love interest. Thankfully, the fourth game mostly avoids that problem. Yes, you get to kiss the girl that you chose at the end, but only for the old Class 7, including Sarah and also Toa, because they're adults. You're not allowed to kiss the new Class 7 because you're an instructor and they're your student, which is kind of hypocritical for the game to do that when you can romance Sarah in the second game. Also, no kissing between either Elise or Princess Alvin in case you're pursuing either of them. Force Branch Campus is different to the Force Military Academy, and it has provided loads and loads of really colorful characters with their own unique personalities and struggles. While most of their storyline and character arcs are in the third game, some of them do get a spotlight here and there, and it genuinely makes me want to root for them in the future. The game makes me care enough for the characters that I shouted my desire to ship them, which doesn't always happen, or at least as of late. The old Force graduate too have their own storyline and character arcs that the developers really put a lot of effort into. A lot of them has grown to become their own unique individuals who pursue all sorts of jobs that they're passionate with. Some of them manage to find love for each other, even if it's quite the rough road ahead. There's even a conclusion for the Fisher couple if you manage to catch all the fishes that I won't spoil, but it's one hell of a satisfying conclusion. It makes gathering all the profiles and getting to know them in the previous games a whole lot more rewarding, and it's still the case here for the branch campus students. And of course, there's the new Class 7. Honestly, I feel like comparing the new Class 7 with the old is, while understandable, also rather unfair. I mean, there are loads more people in the old Class 7 compared to the new, with varying personalities from one to the other. But even still, the new Class 7 managed to bring its own life and energy into the entire storyline, with their own backstories, personal struggles, and their own hardship to get through that makes them relatable in a different way. As I said before, I'm rather bummed by the limited number of bonding points, but that doesn't mean that the bonding moments themselves are all bad. In fact, they're all actually great, both old and new Class 7 alike. They explore all of the characters even further, and showing more and more depths that you haven't seen from them, while also strengthening your relationship with that character. If there's one big problem that I have with Trails is that the villains are too overpowered. They're too arrogant and too relaxed with their own pursuit towards evil, and they barely suffer any sorts of consequences for those, even when they fail at their pursuit. That's fine for the earlier Trails games, but we're on the endgame now, and pulling that crap off is really starting to get old. It makes the villains less intimidating and more like a crying Wojak hiding in a smug face mask. Thankfully, this doesn't apply to all the villains in Cold Steel 4. In fact, Cold Steel 4's villains mostly consist of good characters that turn evil, and some of them turn evil for understandable reasons. Thankfully, it doesn't have the Xenoblade Chronicles 2 problem where they just dump the villain's backstory in the last minute before their demise to make us sympathize with them. No, their backstories are introduced more naturally throughout the story, and while Trails did dump loads of backstories, they do it at an appropriate time and actually build up the backstory dumping moment so that we can anticipate it rather than shoving them in the last freaking minute before their death. For example, the story arc with Duvali and Arianrod is actually pretty intriguing. They build up her story with the backstory dump moment, but it doesn't fill up the entire puzzle piece, which is something that she has, and the moment she gave it to us before the fight, all of that backstory we learned from her finally clicks. The conclusion for her arc is one of the rarest moments that I've had in a video game where a character did something so personal that I genuinely want to burn them in a stake. I'm talking to you, Rufus. What you did there was personal to me, and I look forward to kick your ass in Hajimari. Surprisingly enough, Gilead Osborne ends up being a really good overarching Thanos-like villain for the series, and he too can be considered a good character that turned bad. Despite him going to rather extreme degrees in achieving his goals, I'm genuinely surprised in how all of his plans end up working for him, even in the true ending of the game, and how the end goal for him is to make Reen and the rest of the gang to destroy the real big bad figure that's been plaguing the Empire for years. And unlike Endgame, it doesn't require 5 years before the protagonists figure out how to actually save the world. And unlike Endgame, Osborne at least has more complex plans than just wiping out half the population and expecting profit. And that leads me to something baffling that Trails did, which is to have two endings. You got the first normal ending that doesn't really conclude anything, and it just ends in the last minute, whereas the true ending is something that you can only get if you beat all the cryptids in the game and follow a specific quest that Toval will ask you to do when you beat all of them. Thankfully, you can skip those, but what baffles me is that I did the required side quests, which can be done before you even beat the game once, and I still got the normal ending, so all of that is just a waste of time. I'm willing to do all of the side quest game just to get the S rating because they're great and have decent stories. So why punish me for it? And why does this game have two endings? Honestly, I don't know. It just baffles me that this is the only game from the series that I know of where they decided to pull this kind of crap. It just forced me to sit through two end credits with one being non-canon anyway. You're not Nier Automata, Trails, you're Trails, and I want you to stay that way. Speaking of things being pointless, and this also applies to you too, Persona, what's the point of a video game having a romance mechanic and not have them to continue in the next game in any significant way? Why is Mass Effect the only game in history that does this well? Remember when I said that everyone wants to bang Reen? Yeah, this wouldn't have been a problem if Reen already has a relationship with the previous characters in the game, which he totally can, so that Reen can tell the people who confess to him, sorry, but I already have someone in mind, instead of just leaving them hanging out for the rest of the game like a prick. You can't just tell me that Reen and insert your possible love interest here broke off the romance at some point between 2 and 3 and they're totally okay with it. Declaration of love and the subsequent relationships that follow are not insignificant things to be brushed off, guys. Yes, it's kind of funny that Ren got beaten in a comedic fashion if he gets his harem in Persona 5, but if someone does this in real life to this many women, they wouldn't be friends anymore, let alone a couple. It's such a catastrophic level of emotional backstab that not everyone, especially Futaba, can recover from in just a couple of days. I'm genuinely shocked that Sojiro is totally okay with Ren breaking her heart and tearing it to pieces. I know you cheated on everyone, including my stepdaughter, and you broke her heart, but here's some chocolate anyway. Parent of the freaking year, Sojiro, what is wrong with you? Wait, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, Trails. I'm just saying, this is probably the first game that I've played in my life that guilt trips me into choosing a love interest. I mean, Fee was the first person who confessed to me, and granted, I don't mind choosing her. She's definitely among my top tier waifus, but I still genuinely feel guilty of leaving her hanging for the rest of the game. This happened several times with several other characters, including the ones that I like, and you don't even have to cheat the game to get them. You just need to do their bonding moments and they'll confess to you eventually. I mean, yes, you can choose not to do these bonding events, but you wouldn't see the actually good story content behind it. It pisses me off because there are loads of interesting stories and scenes that can be done if they just acknowledge that the romance exists. There could be loads of interesting dialogues that can come from characters either agreeing or disagreeing, or just totally indifferent with your romance choice. That would increase the replayability of the entire series because you just want to know what character X will say if you date character Y or something along those lines. I want to see Fee's allies from Zephyr chastise me or giving me the cold stares for dating her. Something consequential at least to let me know that the love interest choice that I made is something that really matters to me and how it impacts everyone around them. I mean, I get that the first 2 Cold Steel games were originally released in different platforms than the last 2, so importing your romance choice is not gonna be possible. But you know what you can do to solve this problem? Ask the player questions, like Metal Gear Solid 3 before they begin. Have they played Zero? If so, who did you choose to romance as Lloyd? Have they played Cold Steel? If so, who did they choose to romance as Reen? You can leave Reen being single by default, that's okay, but I played through the previous games and I made my choice. Don't make that choice pointless. I want my choice to open up so much more interesting possibilities and so many interesting storylines and dialogues, one that I don't mind replaying the game all the way through again. At least by that way, I wouldn't have the female characters confessing to me left and right and making me feel guilty and having to choose one and abandon the other. Look, all of these complaints that I have is nothing more than what I personally think could have been done better for the game. And Cold Steel 4 is not perfect. There are definitely flaws in the storyline and certain directions that I think could have been done better, like an epilogue that's more than just slideshows. Seriously, I spent hundreds of hours on the series. The least you can do is to let me explore around the big wedding scene at the end. I bring all of this up because I'm genuinely invested with the story, the characters, the universe, and I want to see them more. I want to see the endless potential that the series can give to me. But with all of that being said, the Trails saga, or at least the first major saga, pretty much ends right here, and it ends in an imperfect but still satisfying way. Trails has turned into a shonen anime to me, as in a series that I look forward to. I look forward for a new Trails game in the same way I look forward to a new anime season. I just realized that Falcom is getting more and more frequent with their release dates, and that's good because I love their games and I want to see more of them. I've gotten so attached to the series that this music that I play right here is so freaking good that I can't listen to it for a couple of days after I beat the game, because it reminds me of the bittersweet notion that the saga ends right here, and I don't think there's gonna be any other game that's quite like it. I'm so invested with the characters and the storyline. I want to see them grow and develop even further. I want to see what the universe has to offer next, and the soundtracks really did not help to quench this feeling. They only tugged my heartstrings even further. So Neon Falcom, you did it again. You brought me a masterpiece that is unlike any other games that I played in my entire life. I'm blessed to be in this journey, and I look forward to what's gonna happen next.